Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing plates, and so I'm going to be showing you guys how to throw a plate on the wheel. This could be dinner plates, it could be small little, dishes for your bathroom, whatever you'd like. For this you're going to end up needing a pottery wheel, a bucket of water. I always recommend a sponge. You will need one of these wire tools as well, and I always suggest a needle as well. Optional is you can use these what we call ribs. They come in a variety of different sizes. I like the metal ones. Plastic might be better for you. And then a ruler. If you do want to make a set of these, you might want to measure out how big your stuff is going to be. And then you're going to want a fairly large chunk of clay if you are doing larger plates. Plates do take up a lot more clay than you would think because a lot of it does come down to trimming. And so we're just going to go ahead and use a bit more. You can always chop stuff off later if you end up having too much, but you can never add more to it in the middle of the process. So I suggest starting bigger, and then, if you can cut stuff off later to make it the size that you want, go ahead and do that. But other way around, it's not going to work. So let's get started. So if you have a big lump of clay like this in a square, you're going to want to pat that down. So I'm just going to go ahead and really paddle this into a nice ball. It's just gonna make it a bit easier later. Who's your daddy? And again, if you guys end up smaller than this, that's totally fine, but that's about good enough. Just enough that the corners are rounded, makes it easier for it to center in the beginning. So, and if you haven't been very experienced in throwing, I would suggest watching my how to throw intro video before doing this, because it's gonna explain all the stuff about centering. So once we get to the step, we're good. So first thing we're gonna do is make sure our wheel is on. Make sure it's definitely stuck on there, and then we're gonna go ahead and get this soaking wet, and we'll get centered. Now, the larger you go, the harder this is gonna be to center, so it might take a little bit longer for some people. I always like to cone before doing anything, so go ahead and get all those air bubbles out by coning. So the most important step to this is just getting centered. Once you're here, that's really the hard part, is just getting it to this point. So let's get this. Feel a little bit of a wobble in there. All right. So now that this is centered, all we're going to do is we're going to just flatten this out. This is different because you're probably used to pushing the hole in here and then opening it up and lifting. With plates, you don't want to open it up. You just kind of want to flatten out. So what we're going to do is I like to use this part of my hand. I just like to push down and out. And the reason why we want to push down and out is because you'll see that the base of this also gets a bit wider as well. You don't want to pull this out because you want to make sure that whatever this is attached to on the wheel head, that gets wider too. Because if we're just starting to pull this out, it's going to end up getting a little bit off center because it really doesn't have a whole lot to hold on to if this is far away from anything that's in a whole point of contact. So we'll just keep doing that. Down and out. Now, if you find that this technique doesn't really work for you on this part of your hand, go ahead and use your fingers. That also works. Now we might want to check our depth once we get to a point where this is starting to get a bit wider. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this in, drop my finger in there, pull that out. We can see that that's about 1/2 inch deep. With plates, you do want to make sure that you do have quite a bit extra. So I know that with my very first video, I told you guys to leave about the size of our finger width, 1/8 of an inch. This one you want to do maybe a bit larger than that, like 3/8 of an inch, possibly even 1/2. You will trim all of it off. So I always like to use my sponge as well. This does make things a bit easier. Push down and out, whichever way ends up working for you. I just suggest that you're either pulling out or going off to the side. Never try and go all the way over here, because then that just lets things get away from you, so it's kind of harder to control if it's all the way out here. Oh, I feel a little bit of a air bubble in there. Yeah, it's okay. So if it gets to a point where we got this middle right where we want it to, now we can go ahead and kind of start to lift up the sides. I do always try and check throughout this, like where we're at lengthwise, just to see. So we're at about 11 inches. So I'm aiming for about a 10-inch dinner plate. So you're gonna see that your sides are gonna end up a little bit thicker here. Once we get here, and if you want it to kind of lift up a little bit, I'm just going to dig my fingers right under the outside here, just enough to get my fingers under. And then from there, we can go ahead and just pull a little bit. You really don't want to start from the center, you just kind of want to get a little bit under there. And don't worry if this isn't the exact shape that you want right now. Remember, a lot of this will be trimming. Now this is obviously a little bit off, so this really brings in our needle tool. So if we want to go ahead and cut a little bit of that off, because I feel like I definitely started with a bit much, we're just going to go in from the side. You can start from the inside or the outside, but you just want to make sure you slowly rotate until it punctures. So you never want to try and get this needle through all the way in the first time, because what this first couple of rotations does is it seeps for like makes kind of like a perforation. So once it does finally go through, you can see how it just kind of starts to rip along that line. If you just try and stab right through it, it's just going to end up breaking the whole side of the pot. So now that we have a little bit less there, we can go ahead and refine these edges a bit more. Maybe take our sponge over them to get them that nice rounded shape. Once we get to about here, this is kind of where I like to bring in the ribs. I'm gonna go ahead and use a metal one, but you can also use a plastic one. But if you want to get this, like all the lines and stuff off, you can go ahead and really use one of these ribs. You always want to hold these at kind of an angle. You never just want to go straight in, because then it'll catch the edge. So you always kind of want to see how I'm angling this. This will kind of take off some of those finger marks if we don't like those there. If you have a little bump in the middle, sometimes we end up with like that little nipple there. And if you want some sort of like a line, which can be really nice for glazing if you're using two types of glaze, so that way if you want that nice line from where the rim and the bottom of the plate end up meeting, you can always kind of use one of these to really carve in where you want that. I'm not gonna go for that, but it is just another option. There is a million different ways that you can do this, so don't think that just because I'm showing you one way that this is the only way to do it. So once I think I have this to where I want it, I'm gonna go ahead and get some stuff off of the edges here. A lot can build up here, and I know that we're gonna end up trimming, but it does kind of help us later in the process if we get it right now. So I always like to do a little bit of cleanup, make it easier for myself later. And then we can go ahead and try this, because once you do end up adding an angle to something that's flat, it's definitely going to change the size of it. So for this, see that it's about 11 inches wide. You know what, I think we're good with that. You do also want to take into consideration that things do shrink about 10 to 15%. So if it's about 11 inches, it'll be closer to 10 once this is fired. But my rim is a little bit off again, if you guys can see that. And so I'm going to go ahead and take that off one more time. You can do this step as many times as you would like. It's completely up to your discretion. Taking off this rim too also makes it easier when you end up trimming, because you know that this is going to end up sitting level. You don't want to be trimming upside down and having something kind of wobble around on you. And if you aren't familiar with trimming, I do have another video on that already up, so go ahead and check that out. So I think we are just about good here. So let's go ahead and wire this off. This can be a little bit nerve-wracking to wire plates just because with it being wider, it does tend to give a little bit more slack. So what I like to do is I like to get it underneath a little bit and give it a slow twist while I pull this as tight as I can. I'll just pull that right through. Perfect. And with plates, you really don't want to be able to see that wire. If you do end up seeing that wire, do make sure that later on when you are trimming, you do take into consideration how thin that is. All right, everyone, so there is plates on the wheel for you. I hope that that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, go ahead, leave them in the comments. I'm gonna try and answer as many of them as I can. And if you liked this video, go ahead and hit like, subscribe. And if you wanna check out some cool art, I do also sell a lot of my work, so go ahead and check it out. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.